So here you are in the United States, and I've been struck by your writing about the election and about the war, Russia-Ukraine. You've been saying that Trump's election is something that Russia has been embracing, even before this dust-up with Ukraine. Why?
I think Vladimir Putin has been watching Donald Trump for so many years, and seeing him some kind of a soulmate, I guess, because both of them share the same perception, same very cynical and non-ideological perception of the modern world. And I will tell you even more from what I'm hearing from Moscow right now. They feel that that's the end of the United States as they used to be.
So, as the leader of the world.
As the stronghold of liberal democracy.
Okay.
And they compare it to the collapse of Soviet Union, because Soviet Union was the state based on ideology, and since the moment people stopped believing in communism, Soviet Union was doomed to collapse. Mm-hmm. And that's some kind of the same process we're watching right now.
But in reverse.
In reverse. A lot of Americans don't seem to believe in liberal democracy. Mm-hmm. And Vladimir Putin is practicing this very pragmatic form of brutal capitalism without human face, without paying attention to human rights or any kind of values. And they think that that's the same approach that is going to be the new ideology of Trump's America.
Of global peace.
A European intelligence service uncovered a document that was prepared for the Kremlin the same week the president's team met with the Russians in Saudi Arabia. According to the Washington Post, it details much of what we've already seen play out, basically telling Russia how to stall while it continues to dismantle the Ukrainian state. It, quote, lays out ways in which Russia could boost its negotiating position by exacerbating tensions between the U.S. and both China and the European Union, by proposing U.S. access to Russian minerals, including territories it occupies in Ukraine. It also goes into how Putin should reject peacekeepers, propose demilitarized zones along the border. How do you know President Trump isn't being played right now by Putin?
Well, look, that's almost laughable. I'll take President Trump in dealing with the likes of Xi, of Kim Jong-un, with Putin and others. Certainly, ahead of his predecessor, and really, as both President Putin and Zelensky said on our first call just a few weeks ago, only President Trump could drive this to an end. Mm-hmm. Only President Trump can bring this war to look. Jackie, we know who we're dealing with. We know who we're dealing with on all sides. And we are going to engage in diplomacy. We are engaging in diplomacy, and that will involve both carrots and sticks to get both sides to the table, but to also resolve this in a way that is permanent and enduring.
Speaking of the carrots.
The first guest this morning is just back from his hours-long meeting with Putin himself behind closed doors in Moscow. Joining us now, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Envoy Witkoff, thanks for joining us. How was the meeting? Tell us about it. What did Putin tell you?
Well, first of all, Jake, thank you, and thank you for having me on the show this morning. I met with President Putin. I think the meeting was somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. It was positive. We discussed. It was a solution-based discussion, and that's how I would describe it.
So, as we understand it, and please correct us if we're wrong, Putin's demands include, 1, the complete surrender of Ukrainian forces in Kursk, that's that Russian region that Ukraine seized. 2, international recognition that Ukrainian territory seized by Russia no longer belongs to Ukraine. 3, limits on Ukraine's ability to mobilize its military. And 4, a halt to Western military aid to Ukraine and a ban on foreign peacekeepers such as French or British soldiers in Ukraine. Is that accurate? And if that is accurate, it does sound as though Putin wants to keep the land that he seized, and then he wants Ukraine to not be able to defend itself in the future. Is Trump worried that accepting these conditions might just set the stage for another Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Jake, I would not call your description entirely accurate. Look, back before this visit, there was another visit, and before that visit, the two sides were miles apart in where they were. The two sides are today a lot closer. We had some really positive results coming out of Saudi Arabia, discussions led by our National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. I described my conversation with President Putin as equally positive. So the two sides we've narrowed the differences between them, and now we're sitting at the table. I was with the president all day yesterday. I'll be with him today. We're sitting with him discussing how to narrow it even further. That's how I would describe it.
Can you tell us where they are right now? The 4 points I just outlined might be a meeting or two old. Where is Russia right now?
No, I think the four regions are of critical importance here. And we're in discussions with Ukraine. We're in discussions with all the stakeholder European countries. So that includes France, Britain, Norway, Finland, the whole host. And we're in discussions with the Russians, too, about those regions. We're also in discussions about all kinds of other elements that would be encompassed in a ceasefire.
Has President Trump decided on next steps? Are these negotiations at any point where President Trump himself might get involved?
Well, I think President Trump is involved in every aspect and dimension of these discussions. I briefed him within 5 or 10 minutes of the meeting with President Putin. I was in the U.S. Embassy briefing him and the Vice President and Susie Wiles, our Chief of Staff, and Mike Waltz, our National Security Advisor. So the President is getting updates in real time on everything that's happening, and he's involved in every important decision here. I expect that there'll be a call with both presidents this week, and we're also continuing to engage and have conversation with the Ukrainians. We're advising them on everything we're thinking about.
Is the U.S. willing, as part of this peace process, to recognize Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory as Russian territory as part of a deal?
I don't want to speak to that at this moment. I mean, I think it's a little bit premature to get into that now. I think we're going to have teams, United States negotiators, meeting with the Ukrainians this week, in discussions with them this week. Same thing will happen with the Russians. And I think, as the president said, he really expects there to be some sort of deal in the coming weeks, maybe. And I believe that that's the case. I actually believe that that's the sort of progress that we saw in my conversation with President Putin, and that's the sort of progress that we saw in the Saudi talks.
So after Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire without preconditions, take a listen to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said about Russia.
We're going to tell them this is what's on the table. Ukraine is ready to stop shooting and start talking. And now it'll be up to them to say yes or no. I hope they're going to say yes. And if they do, then I think we made great progress. If they say no, then we'll unfortunately know what the impediment is to peace here.
So Putin has not immediately said yes to this ceasefire deal. So as Secretary Rubio puts it, is it now clear that Putin is the impediment to peace right now?
I think, look, I don't want to put words in President Putin's mouth.
Why are all of those folks wrong and President Trump is right about his tariff policy?
Well, Chris, and thanks for having me here. And look, what I am not going to say that went on for a long time under the Biden administration and for a lot of the media, and I'm not going to point fingers, but they used to say it was a vibe session and the American people don't know what they talk about. And Donald Trump, his administration, myself, all believe that the American people know what they're feeling, and that we believe that our policies will change that. Clearly, they are traumatized from what's happened with this affordability crisis that was brought on by the previous administration. They want relief. We've been in for 8 weeks. We are putting the policies in place that will make the affordability crisis go down, inflation moderate, and that as we set the sails, I am confident that the American people will come our way, even if some of the media narrative doesn't.
Well, and just to be clear, I mean, these are polls that are taken 2 months into President Trump's presidency. But let's talk about what happened in the stock market this week. Worst week for the market in 2 years. Does that worry you, Mr. Secretary?
Not at all. I've been in the investment business for 35 years, and I can tell you that corrections are healthy, they're normal. What's not healthy is straight up, that you get these euphoric markets. That's how you get a financial crisis. It would have been much healthier if someone had put the brakes on in 06, 07. We wouldn't have had the problems in 08. So I'm not worried about the markets. Over the long term, if we put good tax policy in place, deregulation, and energy security, the markets will do great.
I hear you say you're not worried about the markets, but nearly 60% of Americans are invested in the markets. That's their retirement savings. What do you say to Americans who have real concerns that their retirement savings may be in jeopardy?
I say that one week does not the market make. As Warren Buffett says, over the short term, the market is a voting machine. Over the long term, it's a weighing machine. And again, Kristen, it would have been very easy for us to come in, run these reckless policies that have been happening before. We've got these large government deficits, 6.7% of GDP. We've never seen this. When we're not in wartime, not in recession, we are bringing those down in a responsible way. We are going to have a transition, and we are not going to have a crisis.
So, folks, this is awful for Trump because people are giving up on him, right? When we talk about the consequences of Trump's staff quitting, how a lot of the people who were around from 2016 to 2020 aren't around anymore, both his staff and like people in Congress, like, you know, who shouldn't see themselves as Trump staff, but Trump sees Republican congressmen and senators as his employees. He does. It's not constitutionally accurate. It's not accurate in any sense, but he views them as employees. He views, say, Marjorie Taylor Greene as one of his assistants who's out there to work for him, right? That's his viewpoint, right? Maybe he doesn't express it like that, but that's functionally how he's acting. But they don't even make good arguments. This is quitting and phoning it in, epitomized 101. You want to know what quitting and phoning it looks like? Look at Republicans on TV here. And when you actually do see somebody that knows what they're talking about, well, my goodness, they're against Trump. So this is something to remember. All of the people are gone. People have mentioned it a couple nights ago. Somebody was mentioning, look, man, a lot of the people that were around for Trump Part 1 were awful. In some cases, literally criminal. In some cases, corrupt, all of that. But they were not as unhinged in some cases as the new group of people. Take some of the people that were around for Part 1 and aren't around anymore, and look at who's replaced them. They are cowards, they are traitors, they are crooks in some cases, and it showcases why quitting on Trump has hurt Trump.